Welcome to the world of sci-fi story, and don't forget the like and subscribe the channel. You're my first human. Teach me everything, the female alien soldier demanded. Sergeant Ben Dakin leaned back in his creaky chair, boots propped up on the control panel. Outpost Zeta 9 was the most boring assignment in the galaxy. A dusty, desolate rock on planet Zilar 9, with nothing but sand, rocks, and the occasional scuttling alien critter. Excitement here meant fixing the coffee machine or counting the minutes until his next nap. The radio crackled to life. Unidentified ship approaching. Requesting landing clearance. Ben shot upright, nearly tipping his chair. Visitors were rarer than rainfall. Permission granted. Welcome to scenic Zeta 9, he responded, sarcasm dripping from his voice. He hurried outside, squinting against the sun's glare as the ship descended. Its sleek, silver body gleamed, its engines humming with precision. The hatch hissed open, revealing a figure that made Ben's heart stutter. She was breathtakingly beautiful, petite, but radiating power, with strikingly blue skin and long silver hair that cascaded. Like molten metal, her form-fitting armor shimmered, hugging every curve, with military precision. Eyes like ice locked onto his, unblinking and coldly analytical. Ben's mouth went dry. Welcome to Outpost Zeta 9. I'm Sergeant Dakin. You are. She marched forward, movements crisp and calculated, stopping inches from his face. Her voice was commanding, laced with an accent that was both melodic and chilling. I am Commander Vela of the Zoran Alliance. You will teach me everything about human customs. He blinked. Everything. Everything, she confirmed, her face deadly serious. Including your species' mating rituals. Ben's brain short-circuited. I'd what? Without warning, she raised her arm. A sleek plasma gun materialized from her wrist armor, its barrel glowing ominously as it hovered an inch from his nose. You will comply, she stated matter-of-factly. Resistance will be neutralized. Ben raised his hand slowly, eyes crossing, as he focused on the weapon's pulsating tip. Okay, let's just take a breath. No need to vaporize the tour guide. Her gaze never wavered. Your cooperation is appreciated. Lowering the weapon, she stepped back, her posture rigid, as if awaiting his next command. Ben exhaled, trying to gather his wits. This was definitely not in the manual. So, why me? You were chosen based on proximity and rank, she explained, her tone clinical. You are the highest-ranking officer on this outpost, and thus, the most suitable candidate for my research. Ben couldn't decide if he should feel flattered or terrified. And what exactly are you researching? Vela's face softened, barely. My mission is to understand human culture for diplomatic purposes. To foster peace, one must first understand. This includes all aspects of your civilization, including mating customs. His cheeks burned. You mean dating? She tilted her head, her expression one of genuine curiosity. Dating, mating, emotional bonding. Your species places illogical importance on such interactions. I wish to understand why. Ben's brain was still playing catch-up. He was stuck on the part where a beautiful alien warrior was demanding he teach her about dating, with a plasma gun. Listen, I'm just a soldier. Not exactly qualified to teach. That. Her eyes narrowed. You are human. You have participated in these rituals, yes? He scratched his neck, suddenly feeling very self-conscious. I mean, yeah, but excellent. You will begin immediately. Her tone was as decisive as if she'd ordered a tactical strike. Ben opened his mouth, then closed it, completely at a loss. He was an expert in combat, not courtship. But one look at her unyielding expression, and that plasma gun told him he didn't have a choice. Fine. I'll teach you, she nodded approvingly. Acceptable. We will start with the basics. I have observed that physical appearance is a factor. You will evaluate mine. He choked. Evaluate. She took a step closer, her icy eyes boring into his. Do you find me attractive? His face went beet red. Well, I mean, yes, objectively speaking. Vela seemed to process this, her head tilting. Again. Noted. Human males respond positively to symmetry and exposed dermal tissue. I shall incorporate this data into my strategy. Ben's jaw dropped. Strategy. She ignored his outburst, already walking toward the outpost. Prepare yourself, Sergeant. Your lessons begin at dawn. As she disappeared inside, Ben's knees finally gave out, and he sank onto the sandy ground, staring at the sky in disbelief. His life had just gone from boring to absolutely insane, and he realized with a shiver it was only the beginning. The next morning came far too quickly for Ben's liking. He had been drafted into an alien's personal dating school, and somehow he'd agreed to it, all because he didn't want to be turned into space dust. He trudged to the mess hall, hoping a cup of coffee might jolt him into some semblance of functionality. But as he rounded the corner, he was greeted by a sight that made his stomach drop. Vela stood in front of the wall-mounted holoscreen, flipping through a list of human films with intense concentration. Ben blinked, wondering if this was some sort of fever dream. Good morning. Vela didn't look up from the screen. Good morning, Sergeant. I have begun my research on human courtship rituals. I require a comprehensive understanding of your romantic media. Her voice was flat, like she was discussing a new type of weaponry. Romantic media. Ben repeated, rubbing his face. You mean movies? Yes. I have identified a genre called romantic comedies. It appears to be a significant source of cultural information. She paused and glanced at him. Your film selections are dated. I already analyzed them, but there are discrepancies in the emotional responses they suggest. Please explain. Ben stared at her, trying to process the absurdity of the situation. Vela, these movies, they're for entertainment. They're not manuals on how humans interact. Incorrect, she responded, pointing at the screen. These films show you how you behave in the presence of potential mates. For example, the concept of fate is used frequently. According to this movie, the right person will simply appear at the right time, and no amount of social disparity can prevent the inevitable coupling. She paused, looking at Ben like he was a subject in a lab experiment. Is this true? Ben swallowed hard, feeling like he was walking into a minefield. I mean sometimes, I guess, but fate isn't really a thing. It's more about timing and chemistry. Vela raised an eyebrow. Chemistry. Ben sighed, rubbing his temples. Yes, it's that feeling you get when you're around someone and you just click. It's more than just attraction. It's a connection. Her head tilted as she absorbed this, clearly not satisfied with the vague answer. I see. You believe that humans are driven by feelings rather than reason. Ben opened his mouth, then closed it. Yes, but also no. Look, it's complicated. It's emotional, physical, and psychological all at once. Vela appeared to take this in with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. She swiped the screen to the next movie. Explain this one to me. It appears to involve aggression as a form of affection. He quickly racked his brain for a good explanation. Okay, look, in this movie, two people start off by not liking each other, but over time, they get to know one another. And they realize that their initial dislike was more about misunderstanding and pride than anything else. It's not about being aggressive. It's about learning to trust each other. Vela's face remained impassive. Trust. So humans find their mates through conflict. Well, I wouldn't say conflict is the goal, Ben clarified. But yeah, Some people get competitive in their relationships. It can come off as aggression. But it's usually just two people trying to figure out how they feel about each other. Vila absorbed this with a sharp nod. Understood. I will practice more aggressive verbal exchanges to simulate this interaction. I believe this will expedite the learning process. Ben's eyes widened. Whoa, no. That's not what I meant. Vila looked at him then, her cold expression softening just the tiniest bit. I believe I understand. Emotional investment is not simply an action, but a process. Ben nodded. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Her eyes shifted to him, calculating. I have learned much about the theoretical aspects of human bonding. It is time for practical application. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze never leaving his face. I will test my theories through direct interaction with you, Sergeant. Ben was suddenly aware of how close she was, his breath catching in his throat. The seriousness in her eyes was no longer clinical. It was something else. He could practically feel the weight of her expectations bearing down on him. Look, he started, his voice coming out more strained than he intended. I'm just here to help. Let's take this slow, okay? No need for, testing theories on me right now. Vela didn't seem deterred. Very well. But rest assured, Sergeant, I will learn everything. Ben wiped his forehead. Great. This is going to be a long assignment. As she walked off, Ben had the distinct feeling that his simple, boring life on Zeta 9 had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. And a lot more awkward. The days that followed were an exhausting blur of lessons with Commander Vela. Ben had no idea how he'd ended up as a human relationship tutor to an alien warrior, but somehow, that was his reality now. And each lesson brought something new and bizarre to the table. Today, however, felt different. Vela had insisted they go on a date. His own words were, "Are you out of your mind?" But she had firmly ordered him to take her to the observation deck for cultural assimilation, which, of course, sounded like something straight out of an alien handbook. Ben arrived early. He had no idea what she expected, especially after the last few lessons where she treated flirting like a military exercise. But there she was, waiting for him by the huge window that looked out over the barren landscape of Sailor 9, her arms crossed over her chest. Commander, Ben greeted, trying to sound casual, though his stomach was flipping. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched the sandstorm swirling across the distant horizon, the wind bending the rocks and dirt like some apocalyptic landscape. When she finally turned to face him, her blue skin glowed softly in the dimming light, and her gaze was unusually soft. Do you find this romantic? She asked, her voice low and almost uncertain. Is this how humans connect? Ben froze, staring at her. Her expression was so serious, so devoid of her usual warrior composure, that it caught him off guard. He felt a pang of sympathy. This was the first time he saw Vila as anything but a military commander. In that moment, she wasn't a soldier. She was a person, looking for something she didn't fully understand. He cleared his throat, glancing at the desert. A date is usually about spending time together, not just sitting in a room. Right. But the setting isn't what matters. It's about being present with the other person. Her head tilted as she absorbed this. Present with another human. How does that translate into emotional connection? Ben thought for a moment, rubbing his chin. It's like when you're in a battle. You trust your partner to have your back, right? Vela's eyes flickered with a brief flash of recognition. I trust you, Sergeant. Her words were simple, but the weight of them hit Ben hard. There was a subtle shift in her tone, like she had just let down some of her guard. He cleared his throat. It's kind of the same with, relationships. You trust each other. You share your fears, your thoughts, and you support each other. It's about feeling like you're not alone, even when everything else is falling apart. Vela's gaze softened, her posture relaxing as she slowly walked to the window. I have never trusted anyone in such a way. Ben's heart clenched. You don't have to go through life alone, Vela. Even warriors need people to rely on. Finally, Vela spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. What if I have trouble understanding how to trust? Ben took a step toward her, keeping his voice gentle. That's okay. Trust takes time. It's not something you just get on the first try. Her blue eyes flicked to him, studying him with an intensity that made his stomach do flips. Again, she was so close now, the faintest brush of her armor against his uniform. I am willing to try, she said, her gaze locking onto his. With you, Sergeant. Ben felt something stir inside him, an emotion he'd been trying to ignore ever. Since this all started, he didn't know what was happening between them. He didn't know if it was love, or just a complicated mix of attraction and something deeper. The stars above planet Sylar 9 glittered like 1,000 tiny beacons, but the quiet of the observation deck felt heavier than it should have. Ben sat with Vela, their earlier awkwardness gone, replaced by an unspoken tension that neither of them seemed eager to break. Vela's gaze was locked on the horizon, though her mind was far from the vast, quiet expanse before them. Ben, she said, her voice softer than usual, you were right. There is something more to this, more than just physical closeness. Ben was silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. He hadn't expected the intensity of their connection. It wasn't just that she had agreed to the lesson. It was the way she had surrendered to it, slowly, cautiously, but completely. And now her vulnerability was palpable in the air between them. Sometimes it's not easy to trust, he said finally, meeting her eyes. But it's worth it. Vela turned her head, and in the dim light, her blue skin seemed to shimmer faintly. She looked at him intently, her eyes searching his, as though trying to understand not just him, but what had just happened between them. Ben, she murmured, her voice low. What we shared, it was not just the physical act. It was deeper. I don't know how to explain it. Ben reached out, his fingers brushing against her arm. His touch was gentle, but it sent a shiver through her. You don't have to explain it all now, he said softly. But if you want to understand it more, we can. For a moment, Vela was silent, her brow furrowed, as if battling an internal war. Finally, she turned to him, her face serious but with a trace of something else. Show me, Ben, she said, her voice steady. Show me what you meant when you said love is not just physical. Ben's heart skipped. He knew this wasn't just about curiosity or a continuation of their lessons. It was something deeper, a request for connection that she was willing to risk everything for. His chest tightened, but he nodded slowly. With careful hands, he cupped her face, drawing her closer. Their lips met again, more familiar this time, a silent exchange of something real. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, then slid to the back of her neck as he deepened the kiss. She responded eagerly, her lips parting, tentative but yearning. Ben took his time, gently guiding her movements, letting her feel the rhythm of human touch. She was hesitant at first, but as their bodies pressed closer, her hands explored the contours of his uniform, the muscles beneath it feeling the warmth of him. She seemed to come alive with each touch, each kiss. As he slowly undressed her, Ben could feel her initial resistance melting away, replaced by something vulnerable but eager. Vela's skin was cool against his, her silver hair spilling over her shoulders as her armor was discarded piece by piece. There was no rush, just a quiet intimacy between them, a discovery of each other not just in body, but in spirit. When they finally came together, there was no confusion. Vela's body moved in sync with his, a connection that transcended language and race. For the first time, she felt human warmth. The kind that wasn't calculated, wasn't strategic, but pure. She gasped as they moved together, feeling a depth she couldn't name but understood completely in that moment. This wasn't a lesson, a mission, or an assignment. It was a revelation. Ben kept his movement slow, making sure she wasn't overwhelmed, guiding her with tenderness. When the moment came, they both stilled, caught in the shared intimacy of their connection. Vela's breath hitched, her eyes wide with realization. I didn't expect it to feel like this, she whispered, her voice full of awe and something deeper. Her body trembled with the aftermath, and her hands found his chest again, as if needing reassurance. Ben stroked her hair gently, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. I know. It's not always easy to understand, but it's real. It's love. The vulnerability. The trust. It's all a part of it.